Namaskar, learners and listeners. I am Bharati Sarkar and today I shall talk to you about the building blocks of life. Now, what are the building blocks of life? They are the cells and the tissues. You have already learnt that cells actually form the structural and function of the unit of life. And if you were to think of a building, you would easily know that a brick and many bricks together build a building. So, exactly like the building, cells build a body and cells aggregate into tissues. So, cells of the tissues work in unison so that the body functions normally. Now, in this topic therefore, under this topic you shall learn about the cell. Firstly, what is the history of the discovery of the cell? Secondly, what is the cell theory that was propounded in fact by two German scientists? Thirdly, what is the structure of the cell? What are its organelles? What are prokaryotic cells? What are eukaryotic cells? What are plant cells and animal cells and how are they different from each other? And then something also about the undifferentiated cells or the stem cells, which are now the hotbed of technology, which are helping to remove diseases, which are helping to remove and repair and rebuild organs of the body. And lastly, as you can see on your monitor, we shall also talk about cell division, how cell division takes place. Now, if you were to see the next slide, you would see on the monitor the picture of Robert Hooke. And Robert Hooke, you know, is given the credit of first time discovering a cell in cork. You know that C-O-R-K, cork that forms the lids of many bottles. Cork is a plant material and he found some cork material which was dead, and these dead cells he found were so organized and they were actually part of any plant material. Next to it you can see the picture of a microscope. Without technology this would not have been possible at all, and under the microscope these cells could be magnified, and the credit goes for a very crude microscope to Leeuwenhoek, who actually built the microscope, a crude one, and he himself, after Robert Hooke discovered the cells, saw many little living things he picked up from dust, he picked up from the plant, and he said, yes, all organisms are after all made of cells. So, cell is the functional and the structural unit of any living being, and cells make tissues and tissues then function. Now, once Robert Hooke and Leeuwenhoek discovered this, then there were two German scientists, as I told you, in the 20th century, in the first half of the 20th century. They were Schleiden and Schwann. Schleiden was a botanist and Schwann was a German zoologist, and the two together then said, yes, let us fix it. All organisms are made up of cells, and after having said this, their theory was modified and they themselves added two more points to this theory. First point, cell is the structural and the functional unit of any living being. Second point, a cell can arise only from a living cell which pre-existed it. A living cell only can give rise to another living cell. Thirdly, all living cells in their own way function to keep a body alive, and actually their functions are all together. I use the word unison, that means working together in harmony to see that all the activities of any living body are carried out properly. Now, having learnt a little about the discovery of the cell and the cell theory, Here is on your monitor a very simple diagram which we have also put in, not the same diagram, but same thing depicted in another way when we were doing biodiversity. Here you can see the position of the cell in the organization of life. Last time I told you about history of life, I told you that first it was the biomolecules. From the biomolecules, cells were formed, from cells tissues, from tissues organs, from organs organ systems, and from organ systems an entire individual body of a living being was made. So, this is the organization of life. Here on your monitor you can see prokaryotic and eukaryotic cells. So, you have learned two technical words now, and let us see what do these mean. You know, the first cells, last time I told you when we were talking about history of life, that the first organisms that came into existence on this earth, our lovely beautiful green planet, the only one in its solar system which can sustain life, were the prokaryotes. Pro means before, karyon means the nucleus. So, these were cells, these were the cells of bacteria which could live, survive, maintain themselves, and today we know there are millions and millions of different kinds of bacteria we find on the face of this earth. All bacteria are prokaryotes and they do not have a well formed nucleus. That is why the term prokaryotes, that means before the nucleus formed. Let me tell you here just for information that on our earth for 2 billion years, not million, billion years, it was only the bacteria that were there. Now, what is so special about these bacteria which form the group prokaryotes? The speciality or the characteristic is that they do not have a nuclear membrane, should be they have only one single chromosome which lies in the cytoplasm in a specialized portion called the nucleoid. And lastly, in any bacterial cell, you will not find any organelles that we find in the eukaryotic cells. In eukaryotic, eu simply means true, karyon means the nucleus. So, all organisms other than the bacteria you know are single celled, their body is made of only one cell. So are the protozoa, only one single cell performs all the activities and forms the body of those organisms. But here the protoctists or the protists, the protozoa and the algae, that is the fungi, the plants, the animals, that is the rest of the 4 kingdoms other than Monera are eukaryotic. What does eukaryotic mean? It simply means that their cells have a true nucleus. So, how are they different from the prokaryotes? One, they have a true nucleus. All of them have more than one chromosome, not one single chromosome. Number 3, as you can see on your monitor, they have organelles on the in the cytoplasm. What are organelles? Organelles are little structures independent which are found lying in the cytoplasm and which are responsible for many different functions. You can already see this is a prokaryotic cell and it has a cell membrane, a chromosome and the cell wall. This is a eukaryotic cell, it is a cell membrane again, it has cytoplasm and it has this a nucleus, a full formed nucleus. But in the cytoplasm there are organelles. This is the mitochondria, this is the ER or the endoplasmic reticulum, there are vacuoles, there can be Golgi bodies and there can be lysosomes. So, prokaryotic cells without true nucleus of the bacteria, eukaryotic cells, all other organisms with a full formed nucleus. Mind you, you must have noticed that in any case both the kinds of cells have 2 things in common, And what are those two things in common? They are the nucleus and the cytoplasm, and which is limited by the cell membrane. So, instead of 2, we should say they have 3 parts which are always there in any cell, prokaryotic or eukaryotic: the cell membrane, the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Only eukaryotes also have organelles in them. So, you can see here every cell must have 3 parts, and I have written about the 3 parts there. Now, coming to the next one, let us come to the eukaryotic cell and talk about the organelles. The organelles, here you can see the mitochondrion. This is the one which is the powerhouse of the cell. This is a lysosome which has enzymes so interesting that they are able to break down all the dead parts of the cell so that new parts can be generated. Lysosomes are therefore called suicidal bags. They have enzymes which break down broken down parts. You can see then the endoplasmic reticulum, and since this says smooth reticulum, endoplasmic reticulum, let me tell you that this is smooth because it does not have on its edges tiny bodies which are called ribosomes. Here you see, you can see this part is the rough endoplasmic reticulum because it bears the ribosomes or the small organelles which help to synthesize proteins. Then of course, let us talk about the 3 parts that I said all cells must have in order to survive: the cell membrane, which is the protective membrane, the limiting membrane of the cell which gives it a shape, and lastly, which is so interesting, that it is selectively permeable. It will permit certain substances to go into the cell, some to come out of the cell, but it will restrict the entry of certain substances. We call this selectively permeable. Then the nucleus. The nucleus has a nuclear membrane, it has a nucleolus, and it has the most important parts which are the chromosomes which bear the genes. Now, you hear so much about genes and DNA. We often, even in English language, in literature, sometimes we say, oh, it is in the person's DNA. So, what is DNA? What is a gene? DNA is the chemical substance called deoxyribonucleic acid, which actually forms the genes, and for a long time nobody knew about the genes. It was only in the 60s the people got Nobel Prize also, Watson and Crick for example, and many scientists, I should not take only 1 or 2 names, there were many who worked out and said that genes are made up of DNA, the substance DNA, which is passed on from generation to generation, and that is how you see different organisms are different. A rose plant is different from a papaya plant because its genes are different. The dog is different from the cat or even from human beings, although we share much of the DNA with them, with the mammals, but they are different. Now, therefore, DNA is the genetic material, it is in the nucleus, on the chromosomes. In fact, genes are part of a chromosome which is made up of DNA molecules, and then the nuclear membrane is exactly like the cell membrane, selectively permeable, and then we have the cytoplasm which contains the endoplasmic reticulum, the mitochondria, the Golgi body, the lysosomes, and you can see another organelle here called the centriole, which we find only in animal cells, not in plant cells. Here you can see I have just summarized in a manner which is really like a diagrammatic manner. You can see the different parts and learn these different parts. In the next slide, you shall be able to see endoplasmic reticulum. So, you can see here this is the smooth endoplasmic reticulum without the ribosomes, and this is the rough endoplasmic reticulum with the ribosomes. Ribosomes, I told you, are necessary for formation of the various proteins required by the body. You know, enzymes are all proteins. So, many proteins are required by the body for making the structure, for enzymatic activity, for regulating all the activities, etc. Here is a diagrammatic representation of the mitochondria, which I told you was the powerhouse of the cell. What does powerhouse mean? It means that it is responsible for oxidation of the food material to provide energy. Let me tell you, there are many steps, and the last step in respiration as well as energy production in the living body is at the level of the mitochondria, which are found in the cells. Now, apart from mitochondria, there are Golgi bodies which are responsible for secretion. They actually secrete the proteins, and you know, whoever does biology even later or studies for one's own self, you can see how, you know, proteins are synthesized. And then lastly, there is the picture of the lysosomes. I have already told you they are the suicidal bags, and they are the ones who actually remove all the debris from inside the cell, so that new structures can be you know, generated, and then the body functions properly, which is so important. Now, let me also tell you that plant cells have vacuoles, large vacuoles, which are simple empty spaces. And I also want to tell you that the plant cells have what are known as the plastids. Now, let us see how are plant cells different from the animal cells. Animal cells have an organelle which is called the centrosome, which gives rise to two centrioles, and the centrioles actually give orientation to what is known as a spindle formation. When we do cell division, you will learn that, and animal cells alone have the centrioles, but or the centrosome from which centrioles arise. Plant cells have three different things which we do not find in the animal cells. One is the cell wall. Now, bacteria also have cell walls, but bacterial cells, the cell wall is made up of a substance called peptidoglycan, whereas in plant cells it is made of a substance called cellulose. So, a cellulose cell wall in all cells of plants, a peptidoglycan covering on the cell membrane in all bacterial cells, plastids which may be chloroplasts that are green in color, which give the leaves their green color and which have the green pigment chlorophyll, and which is responsible for carrying out photosynthesis. Plastids also may be chromoplasts. You can see the red flowers which have a different pigment which give a red color. Other plastids which are chromoplasts may give a purple color, a yellow color. In other words, the plastids contain pigments which give different colors to various parts of the plants. And the third part which is found in plant cells and in as very small sized open spaces are the vacuoles. So, this sort of tells you that prokaryotic and eukaryotic differ in certain characteristics, the cells. Plant cells differ from animal cells. Now, next thing I want to tell you is that a body of a living being may be of a single cell, I think I have already told you, or it may be of many cells, multicellular. So, only bacteria and protozoa are single celled, others are all multi-cells. I have told you about the centrioles. Here are the two centrioles formed from a centrosome, which is found on the nucleus of an animal cell, and here the chromosomes which are lying on spindle fibers. Spindle fibers form only when the cell is dividing. Now, if we were to go further ahead, then now we need to talk about the dividing cell. So, let us talk about the dividing cell now. Now, dividing cell, why is cell division necessary? Just think, see, if you have only one cell and it dies, and that cell part of the body also dies, but that does not happen in a living body. It happens only in the dead, in the non living, non dividing bodies. So, in the living body, a cell is capable of division. Now, division is of two types, let me tell you. See, for repairing the body, we need the same kinds of cells. Now, if we need the same kind of cells, then that one cell ought to give rise to two, those two another two, and so on, so that one cell can divide several times. And that is exactly what happens in a cell. A cell is able to, replicate or duplicate its DNA, and the cell is able to then, through certain phases or stages of division, give rise to another cell which looks exactly like it and which also functions exactly like its parent cell. So, the dividing cell, as you can see on your monitor, divides through stages which are called prophase, metaphase, anaphase and telophase. Okay? Now, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase are stages of the cell division which we called mitosis. A mitosis is that kind of cell division which occurs on all the parts of the body of any living being, in which from a parent cell two daughter cells may arise, which are exactly like each other and which are also exactly like the parent cell. We have another kind of cell division which takes place, and this cell division is called meiosis, about which we will study now. And what happens during mitosis? Here you have on the monitor mitosis and meiosis. Meiosis, as I told you, takes place only in the reproductive organs, or the technical term for reproductive organs is gonads. You already know that gonads are, the male gonads are the testis and the female gonads are the ovaries. So, meiosis takes place only in testis and ovaries, and mitosis takes place everywhere. Now, let us see what is the difference. Mitosis, as you can see here, see, this is a cell with two, this is actually the nucleus with two chromosomes, and these two chromosomes, one comes from the father and one comes from the mother. An identical chromosome comes from the mother. So, later on you will learn how every chromosome has a partner. It is in a diploid form, and here you can see the two parts of a chromosome. These are called chromatids. Here are, this chromosome has two chromatids, this chromosome has two chromatids. Then at here at metaphase, these two chromosomes come and lie on the spindle fibers that you saw, and after that the two chromatids which are joined by a centromere break, and it becomes two chromosomes, each with its own centromere. And then at anaphase, again they move to the opposite poles. If we were to go back, mitosis helps in growth, repair, addition of new identical cells. It goes through the four phases I told you: prophase, metaphase, anaphase and telophase, after which two cells are formed. Meiosis, which occurs only in the gonads, has two phases called meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, And in meiosis 2 and meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, again we have prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, and at the end of meiosis 2, from one parent cell actually we get 4 cells, but all 4 cells only have half the number of chromosomes. Now, let us see what are stem cells. You hear so much about stem cells. Stem cells are found in the embryo and also in the parts of the body where they are undifferentiated. What does it mean? They are not made into different tissues. They are just cells which can form any tissues, and they have become very useful. You know, supposing somebody loses a conjunctiva of the eye, then stem cells are used to make that up. It is also used in curing cancer and has many other uses. We will now talk about the tissues. Tissues, as I told you, are the aggregates of cells which have not only a similar structure, but also similar origin. They have arisen in this identical manner and come together to perform a particular function. In the plants, you have two kinds of tissues which are permanent and meristematic. Meristematic tissues, you can see here, are dividing. These are stages of division. This is metaphase of a division. So, they are mitotically dividing and found at the root tips and the shoot tips. There are permanent cells called parenchyma, which are protective in function. There are others which are called collenchyma, which give support. There are sclerenchyma, which also support and give rigidity to the plant, and there are these phloem and xylem. Xylem is for conducting water up from the soil to the leaves for making food, and phloem will help to distribute food at all different parts of the body. Every part needs food. Let us go over to animals tissues now, and animal tissues are again of 4 types. They are epithelial tissues which cover the body. They are of many types of epithelial tissues. They also cover the internal linings of the different organs. Then there are connective tissues. From the name itself you can know that they connect various organs. Then muscle tissue and nervous tissue. So, epithelial tissues may be from their shape cuboidal tissues. I told you they are linings, protective linings. See, outermost lining of the skin is epithelial tissue. Inner lining of the mouth, say, is again epithelial tissue. They are from the shape. They can be cuboidal, they can be columnar, forming long column like, even with little cilia. For example, in our stomach, the inner lining, or the intestine, the inner lining will have little cilia which will drive the food downwards. And then strata simply means layers. So, layers of tissues form stratified epithelium. Now, this simply shows that the body is made up of so many different kinds of connective tissues. There is loose connective tissue called areolar. There is adipose tissues which stores fat. You can see this pink cytoplasm is shifted to one part with the nucleus, and rest is all fat. In our body, the fat tissues are like that. Then blood, as you know, has the plasma, which is its fluid matrix, and in which there are cells, blood cells, the red blood cells and the white blood cells which protect our body from germs, the red blood cells which carry oxygen to different parts of the body. Then there are collagen fibers which give rigidity, and there is cartilage in our in our skeletal system. In our skeleton, there is bone and cartilage, and you can see how the cartilage and the bones are different. Mind you, I want to tell you that all these various kinds of connective tissue are very different from each other, but they all can be, when you study it, just remember it, do not get scared, so many names, but just think they will all have matrix and cells. So, you just need to remember what is the matrix, what forms the matrix, and what are the various kinds of cells. Now, then we come to the third kind of cell, which is the muscle cell. You know, all your movements are due to the muscle cell. All the movements of our digestive system is due to the muscle cells. We move our eyes because of the muscles in our eyes. So, muscle cells are of three kinds. There are the striated muscles. The striated muscles are here, which are in our arms, in our legs, and they have, they have many striations. And if you take the little muscles out of the legs of a cockroach beautifully and stain it, you will find there is the nucleus which can be seen clearly and the striations. In our, the food conducting alimentary canal, the parts have the walls of all the organs of the alimentary canal have these, they are, you can see there are not many striations in them, but this is the skeletal muscle. Of course, I am sorry, this is the cardiac muscle. This is the skeletal muscle that I talked about. I am talking about this one now, which are spindle shaped, have a single nucleus, and they are involuntary. Involuntary simply means that the alimentary canal undergoes peristalsis without the without your brain taking part in asking it to move. Food moves by itself because of the involuntary muscle fibers in the walls of the alimentary canal. Our hands and legs, of course, we move with the striated muscle fibers. And in the previous slide, I am sorry, I just showed you the I said striated muscles for the striations in the cardiac muscle. Cardiac is the heart, and heart muscle, is again involuntary like the striped muscles, unstriped muscles, sorry, and these go on forever and forever till we are alive. They never get fatigued. And of course, the striated muscles for movement, which are under our will, the unstriated muscle fibers for movements without our will, the cardiac muscle fibers which are intercepted by intercalated discs which have striations and which go on forever, are again not under the control of our will. And lastly, the nervous tissue is made of nerve cells. You can see the dendrons here, which are little processes coming out of the cell, the nucleus. I told you right in the beginning, a cell membrane, a nucleus, and the cytoplasm have always to be in a cell. Here are the dendrons, which are not found in any other cells, which actually start the nerve impulse, which capture the stimulus, and then there is this long fiber called the axon, which may even in some cases be covered over by what is known as a neurolemma sheath. This green sheath is the neurolemma sheath. Now, all the cells are connected. This one cell will be connected with another nerve cell exactly identical, which will be here, and the axon endings will actually be very close to the next cell, and the space between the two cells is called the synapse. Now, just quickly to revise, you have studied that cell is the basic structural and functional unit, that there is a cell theory which says that a cell is not only the structural unit, it is responsible for all the functions, and it always originates from pre-existing cells. We then studied about the generalized structure of a cell, which is common to plant, animal, prokaryotic, eukaryotic cells. We talked about the cell organelles, which are found only in eukaryotic cells and perform different functions. And then we talked about the undifferentiated or stem cells found in the embryos. And lastly, we talked about the plant and the animal tissues, which have their different functions to perform. Thank you very much.